Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military with Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 31st of January of 2026. Today we have a lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. Partial blackout hits Ukraine. During the previous 24 hours we received lots of updates about the situation in the energy sector of Ukraine. There were lots of cities and towns that faced power outages. So let's discuss everything in details, and first let's read several articles that were published by different sources. So media says that power collapsed in Ukraine, in Kiev and through Ukraine. Blackouts, no water, broken power lines, metro shut down. Power outages have been imposed across the country. They are in effect in the Chernihiv, Sumy and Zhytomyr regions, as well as in Kiev and the Kiev region. There is a complete water supply outage in Kiev, according to the water utility. The metro has been shut down. Mayor Klitschko reported that the service was halted due to low voltage in the network amid emergency outages. In Kharkiv, the metro has also stopped, and some areas of the city are without power after power surges. The regional power company confirmed emergency outages have affected numerous regions since this morning, and the situation in the unified power grid remains unstable. In the Odessa region, due to frozen power lines were broken, leaving 5 districts without power. So this is the situation in the city. The Ukrainian authorities are trying to stabilize the situation, but it seems that they will not be able to do this. The sources are saying that, according to information, Kiev may remain without power until the end of the day. A serious problem has arisen in the Ukrainian power grid. So what did happen, and what are the statements and comments of the authorities? So somewhere at 11 a.m. of the local time, the Minister of Energy of Ukraine, Shmyhal, commented on the situation. He stated that today, somewhere around at 11 a.m., a technological failure occurred, shutting down the 400 kV line between the Romanian and Moldovan power systems and the 750 kV line between Western and Central Ukraine. This led to a cascading outage in the Ukraine's power grid and the activation of automatic protection systems at substations. So this is the statement of the Minister of Energy, and the President of Ukraine, Zelensky, stated that there were reports by Prime Minister Yulia Sviridenko and Minister of Energy Denis Shmyhal on the emergency situation in Ukraine's energy system caused by a technological issue on the power lines between Ukraine's energy system and Moldova. During the previous 24 hours, several pro-Ukrainian sources stated that that was something like a cyber attack from the Russian side, that the Russians attacked the energy infrastructure of Ukraine not with missiles but with computers. But later, several pro-Ukrainian sources and authorities confirmed that those were just speculations. So this attack and this situation in Ukraine is a very critical situation, and this is the worst scenario that could have happened during the 31st of January of 2026, right before the beginning of talks, very important talks on the territory of the United Arab Emirates. So I would like to remind you that tomorrow talks between the Russian Federation and Ukraine are going to take place there. And the sources are saying, the Russians reported that these talks could be prolonged for 2 days or something like this. And the Russians are waiting that Ukraine will accept demands from the Russian side, and that Ukraine will make some concessions regarding territorial issue and so on. But if you remember, Zelensky yesterday stated that Ukraine will not give Donbass and Ukraine will not give Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant without a fight. So this is the situation, and the Ukrainians, of course, during these days, Ukrainian authorities were trying to stabilize the situation. Furthermore, it seems that Zelensky and not him, but his team, his negotiation team, most likely is planning to tell Russians no about their demands and so on, and the Ukrainians and Zelensky personally were preparing themselves before the beginning of another massive strike from the Russian side. So that is why the Ukrainians were trying to find additional ways how to stabilize the situation. And most likely the current blackouts that took place today on the territory of Ukraine is a part of things and measures that Ukrainians were trying to conduct to stabilize the situation. Most likely the Ukrainians were trying to get additional supply from Romania. Maybe the Ukrainians were trying to get additional supply from Moldova, from Poland, but something went wrong and we saw a technological catastrophe, a technological problem, and that led to a partial blackout through the territory of Ukraine. And this is the worst thing that could happen on the 31st of January, because now the Russians don't need to use even intelligence services. Now the Russians don't need to use satellites. The Russians don't need to use anything, because now the Russians knows the problematic points in energy infrastructure of Ukraine, and the Russians furthermore know exactly where is the weakest point in the entire energy infrastructure of Ukraine. So today, for example, the Moldovan authorities stated that Chisinau and almost the entire territory of Moldova were left without power. According to the country's authorities, serious problems in the Ukraine power grid were blamed for the blackout. According to the Moldovan Minister of Energy, a sharp voltage drop occurred on the 400 kV line, power line, on the morning of the January 31st. The accident led to an automatic shutdown of the Moldovan power grid. So Russians knows for sure know for sure what lines are very important and what lines, power lines of Ukraine, can lead to the situation that we saw during the previous 24 hours. So the Russians don't need to use intelligence. Now they know for sure what exactly to attack tomorrow, or more precisely between the 1st and the 2nd of February of 2026, to get the same result that we could see today. So the entire country, the entire state of Ukraine was hit by partial blackout. So this is the situation. But from the other side, we can understand and we can see that maybe this is something like a special operation from the Ukrainian side, because Ukrainians most likely expect that Russia will attack tomorrow between the 1st and the 2nd of February. So that is why they're, let's say, manipulating with their power lines, with their energy system, trying to distract the Russian attention from the real target and to force the Russians to attack power infrastructure that the Ukrainians want the Russians to attack. So everything is very complicated, but one thing is clear, that tomorrow we will understand everything. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of very important updates. The Russians continue their offensive operation, especially we see that the Zaporizhzhia offensive operation is intensifying. So during the previous day, we received the biggest number of updates exactly from this area. First of all, once again, I would like to point to attention that during the previous 2 or 3 days, the Russians were attacking the logistics of Ukraine in this region, trying to attack the cities like Sinelnikovo, Pavlograd. The Russians were attacking trains, railway service, just with one purpose: not to allow the Ukrainians to bring additional reinforcements and reserves in the direction of the city of Guliai-Pole and in the direction of Zaporizhzhia. And at the same time, the Russians began major offensive operation through the entire Zaporizhzhia direction. Just during the previous days, according to different sources, according to the Minister of Defense, according to pro-Ukrainian sources, the Russians improved their position significantly in the western Zaporizhzhia direction. Since the 27th of January of 2026, the Russians have captured at least 2 settlements in this area. We are talking about the village of Novoyakovlevka, and we are talking about the settlement of Richne. So the Russians are keeping advancing, and the Russians are tasked to advance further. And furthermore, we received the report that first groups of the armed forces of the Russian Federation answered the settlement of Veselyanka, and that there are very heavy clashes right now. So this is the first thing. The second thing, the Russians, after a very short operational pause, resumed their offensive operation on the eastern Zaporizhzhia direction. Just yesterday, we received the report that Russians, as a result of clashes, established complete control over the settlement of Ternovata. Based on the report of the Minister of Defense and the video that was published by the Group of Forces East, yesterday we adjusted the village of Ternovata under complete Russian control. And today, pro-Russian sources published another video, additional video, where we can see how the clashes for the settlement of Svetopetrivka were taking place. The Russians reported that as a result of clashes, the village was also captured by the armed forces of the Russian Federation, and we see that the Russians approached the second defense layer to the west of the city of Guliai-Pole. We are talking about the line of villages of Verkhnya Tersa, Tverkova, Krinichna, Staroukrainka, and the settlement of Zaliznichne. So this is a very important defense layer. The Russians approached this layer from the northern part, from the southern part. Furthermore, different sources stated that Russians entered the southern part of the settlement of Zaporizhzhia. So we are waiting. There are very heavy clashes right now, and most likely if this defense layer falls, then most likely Ukrainians will not be able to stabilize the situation until the city of Orekhov. Now let's move further. As for the Dobropolye direction, during the previous 24 hours, we haven't received anything special, just a video from the north of the city of Pokrovsk, and here we can see up to 5 or 6 or even more vehicles of the Western production that were destroyed during the previous days, during the battle, during the artillery strikes from the Russian side in this area. So this is something like a new cemetery of the Western weapon that was created these days. The Ukrainians are moving and redeploying their troops through this territory with the purpose to attack the northern part of the city of Pokrovsk and to counter-attack in the area of Rodinska. So the Russians just established complete control over the territory, and it seems that most likely Ukrainians will stop attempts exactly using this direction. Lots of important updates are coming from the settlement of Drushkovka, more precisely from the Drushkovka direction. The Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation stated that during the previous 24 hours, the Russians finished the battle for the settlement of Toretska. As of the end of the 31st of January, we still haven't received anything. We're talking about videos that can confirm this. We have just a report published by the Minister of Defense, and based on this report, we have adjusted the map. So the village of Toretska is a very important village. We see that there are 2 strongholds to the north of the settlement. Most likely the Russians haven't captured these strongholds, but most likely the Russians will try to do this in coming days. And when the Russians finish the battle for this territory, including these 2 strongholds, the Russians will enter the operational space, and then they will continue advancing further in the north and eastern direction towards the villages of Pavlovka, Priut, Krasny Kut, with the purpose to get as close as possible to the settlement of Drushkovka. The Ukrainians are trying to bring additional reinforcements in the direction of the settlement of Toretska, but the Russians have established a certain FPV drone control over the territory, trying not to allow the Ukrainians to bring additional units to the line of combat contact. As for the city of Konstantinovka, during the previous 24 hours, as you can see, we received lots of updates from the southern part. When talking about the 30th of January, most of the updates we received from the most northern part of the settlement. As of the 31st of January, most of the updates are coming from the southern part. So as you can see, the Russians are shifting their focus between different parts of the city of Konstantinovka. It depends on the task they have. So during the previous days, the Ukrainians continued sending their forces in the direction of the southern part of the city, and the Russians were attacking reinforcement with FPV drones. I would like to remind you that just yesterday the Russians finished the battle for the settlement of Bereztok. Now the Russians are regrouping, trying to dig in deeper, and we expect that in coming days the Russians will try to make first attempts to enter the southwestern part of the city and to begin the battle for this part of the city of Konstantinovka. As for the Slaviansk direction, during the previous 24 hours, we haven't received almost anything. The Russians continue attacking positions of the armored forces of Ukraine with FPV drones, and basically this is the only thing that is happening here right now. We haven't received anything about additional changes on the ground. The same situation takes place in the area of the city of Liman. The Ukrainians are trying to bring additional reinforcements and reserves in the direction of the city, and the Russians are trying to destroy everything that crosses the river of Seversky Donets. As for the Kupiansk direction, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians improved their position significantly. It's more correct to say that we have adjusted the map in the Russian favor significantly. So these are the changes on the ground between the dates. This is the end of the 30th of January and this is the end of the 31st of January. Pro-Russian sources, most likely based on the reports and different updates and different statements and articles that were published by different sources, including pro-Russian, pro-Ukrainian and neutral sources, decided to publish lots of videos from the northern Kupiansk direction to confirm that this part of the Kupiansk direction is under complete and strong control of the armored force of the Russian Federation. So just during the previous 24 hours, the Russians published dozens of videos where we might see how Russians were moving through the entire Kupiansk agglomeration, how the Russians were moving through different villages in this area, showing us that this territory is under complete and strong control of the armored force of the Russian Federation. So this episode, for example, took place in the southern part of the settlement of Kurilovka. Another episode took place, few more episodes took place through the settlement of Podoli. The Russians published a video with flags, with Russian soldiers moving through the settlement, so lots of episodes, and all of these episodes, as you can see, were added to the map. And based on these map updates, we adjusted the map. Furthermore, pro-Russian sources published a video from the most northern part of the city of Kupiansk-Узловой. Here we can see how Russian soldiers were moving in this area from one building to another, and one of the episodes was geolocated right exactly at this point. So we have adjusted the city of Kupiansk-Узловой also partially under complete control of the armed force of the Russian Federation. But despite the fact that lots of videos were published by pro-Russian sources, there are still lots of positions under control of the armored force of Ukraine, especially in the area of the city of Kupiansk-Узловой, which most likely currently is being divided by Russians and Ukrainians in two parts. So the Russians control most likely up to 30-33% of the city, and the Ukrainians control the rest. As for the northern Kharkiv direction, during the previous 24 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded in the area between the Liptsi and Volchansk bridgeheads. So these are the changes on the ground, and this information today was provided by pro-Russian sources. According to these reports, the Russians crossed the border, and the Russians began advancing further in the southern direction towards the settlement by the name of Vysol. As of now, it's very difficult to understand what the Russians are doing here. Either it's just a real offensive operation, or it's just another attempt of another sabotage and a reconnaissance group to make some mess along the border with Ukraine. Anyway, let's wait and see what is going to be next. But if we increase the numbers of updates since the beginning of this year, we might see that the Russians were attacking these territories significantly, especially with heavy towed flamethrower systems. As you can see, lots of strikes were recorded in this area, and there are several options. Either the Russians are planning to begin their major offensive operation in this area. As you can see, the Russians are using just towed flamethrower systems, heavy flamethrower systems, or the Ukrainians are concentrating their forces in this area with the purpose to carry out offensive operation in the direction of the city of Belgorod. Because if you remember, during the previous days, lots of sources reported that, including the commander-in-chief of the armored forces of Ukraine, Alexander Syrsky, that Ukraine is preparing several offensive operations, and the, let's say, something like this might happen right exactly in this area. So we need to pay attention to this part of the front line, because the Russians are bombing and attacking this territory with all types of weapons they have. We are talking about, first of all, heavy weapons, which means that there is a huge there might be a huge concentration of Ukrainian forces. As for the Sumy direction, the most important video is coming from the city of Sumy itself, and here we can see how Russians attacked the Sumy power station with the Russian drone of BM-35 type. So this is a very important video that shows us that the Russians most likely during the next massive missile attack may attack the city of Sumy. I would like to remind you that the Russians published somewhere on the 26th of January information that the power station of the city of Sumy is continue working, operating. So most likely the Russians are planning to change their plans regarding this power station for tomorrow during the next possible massive missile and drone attack. So this is the situation. The 31st of January of 2026 is coming to its logical end. We are waiting for the 1st of February, but once again I would like to remind you that despite the fact that the parties agreed to have a meeting on the territory of the United Arab Emirates during the 1st of February, we still haven't received or still haven't any confirmation from the Ukrainian side that they're going to send a delegation there. So the meeting might not happen, and if this is going to be like this, then most likely we will face a very powerful attack. And that's it for today. Military with Summary channel reminds you condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.